Well, hello and welcome to a new season of A Few Minutes With. This is the first episode of 2022, and I hope that wherever you are watching this or listening to this, you are safe and healthy and avoiding the winter weather. And what a phenomenal way to kick off this new season with my special guest, Becca Stevens, who is probably no stranger to anybody that's been in a bookstore, turned on television, or had any interaction with the Episcopal Church for any length of time. She is an Episcopal priest. She's an entrepreneur. She is a multi-time nonprofit and support organization founder. Right now, I think she's best known as the founder and president of Thistle Farms in Nashville, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes. She's been named a CNN hero, White House champion of change. And with everything that you're doing, including being a wife and mother and all of these other things, when the heck do you sleep?
I sleep really well. And for a woman my age to say she sleeps well is saying something. I don't understand how or why, but I put my head down the pillow, fall asleep, wake up around 5 and get going.
Well, God love you, and thank you for everything you're doing. This podcast, for those that are unfamiliar with it or listening for the first time, started during the pandemic. So I've started each conversation I've had by asking people how they and their families are doing, how they and their congregations are doing. But Becca, you've got 1,600 employees, 30 global partners, 50 communities, plus your family. So in a much bigger way, how are you and all of these people that you care for doing during the pandemic at this time?
Isn't it, don't you think, thank you for having me, by the way, getting a chance to talk to you and be with you in this continued crazy time is a gift. I mean, that's been the gift of the pandemic to me, is you don't have to do stuff you don't want to do, but you can still do stuff you do want to do.
Well, thank you for doing this.
No, I'm happy. And the truth is my family's doing well. I'm doing well. There's continued, it's just overwhelming sometimes when I really think about it. I ended up in between Delta and Omicron. I made it to Southern Africa. We started a brand new project there in Botswana. They've been doing great work. And I just got word that the director just got mugged, her car broken into, she was mugged, everything was taken from her. So when you ask me that, I don't think in whatever, 1,600 people working around the world or 50 organizations that we help with. I think of like what's happening right in front of me. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
And so I'm thinking about her. Her name is Pearl, and she runs Loratang Center, and she is amazing. 36-year-old survivor. Her parents kicked her out at 16. She became a social worker, and she is like a powerhouse for women in Southern Africa. And now she's gonna be fine, and she will be fine. But my heart's right there this morning. That's what I always think this morning.
Yeah. That's probably a good way of keeping you focused and centered and not trying to take in too much at one time, I would wager.
Yeah. Well, you do that as a pastor, right? You have to go with like what's presenting itself in the day before you.
Ideally, yes. But I'm also I used to be type A. I think I'm type A minus now, but I'm also one that focuses on a lot. So I'm glad for the reminder from you about just focusing on the here and now, which is really important, as I've come to learn during this pandemic time.
Daily bread, brother, daily bread.
Amen to that. I would like to ask you about Thistle Farms, which is a remarkable organization, and I'd like to invite you to talk about it for a minute. But I think you're going into your 25th year, I think, aren't you?
Yes.
So this is a big anniversary, but the work that you have done in supporting survivors of trafficking, prostitution, addiction, and giving them a place to become unbound from these things that have weighed them down and to rebuild their lives is remarkable. And I know it's particularly important to you because of your own victimization when you were young. It's something you've talked openly about. and you talk a little bit about in the latest book. But with all of this going on, for folks that have not heard of Thistle Farms and are listening to me right now going, what is he talking about? What is Thistle Farms and what's your mission? It's rooted in love, I will say that.
Yeah, thanks for asking me about it, because it's been my heart's work for a long, long time. I think I had the idea of what Thistle Farms would be when I got ordained 30 years ago. So Thistle Farms is 25 years old, but I got ordained in the Episcopal Church 30 years ago. This is going to be entering my 31st year in 2022. It started out as a sanctuary for women. I just wanted a safe place for women to go. It's so practical. It's so not complicated. It's so deep theology. And I've kind of kept trying to follow where love leads.
Mm-hmm.
So Thistle Farms moved from just a sanctuary for women survivors in Nashville, Tennessee in 1997 to a national movement with justice enterprises growing to the largest justice enterprise. We are manufacturing bath and body care products that are all natural, amazing, better price than most of the stuff out there. And then we became a global movement for women's freedom, and we have partners all over the world. So it's just kind of saying yes to where love was leading, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Just
keep saying yes. And then what I've learned is if you do stuff kind of, I don't think you say in the church half-assed. I think you say so-so. Is that what you say?
I've actually had a priest mentor tell me one time, don't try and pick 6 things and do them half-assed, pick one thing and do it whole-ass. So I think it's okay to say that.
So what I've learned though, is if you as a priest do it a little bit half-assed, people who know how to do it much better come in.
Mm-hmm.
And do it well, and then you're free to do the next thing. So I disagree with your mentor. Let's just say I disagree with your mentor. It's like it's a gift to your community to do things okay. Like the first candles I made or the first healing oils I made were not great. But people who have dedicated lives and researched and gotten degrees come in and say, no, this is what you need to do. And so you get to learn from people, and then you end up having this amazing thing, and then you move on and somebody else corrects you again, and then you move on and somebody else corrects you again. It's just like this ongoing journey I have, which is like now I'm not really allowed. I'm at what you see behind me is the background at Vanderbilt University Chapel where I worked for 30 years. And we used to make all the products right in the kitchen here, if you can believe it. I mean, like pots, and we would stir things and put them in packages and send them to people and say, light this candle for the woman on the street still. And, people did it. And we went on and we got bigger and bigger and bigger. And now they don't even let me in the manufacturing area. I can't make a candle. And I haven't made a candle in 10 years, not because I don't want to, because they won't let me. What
is, well, and as you were talking about that, I think about something you write about in the book that we won't talk about as part of this conversation, but the challenges that you experienced when you decided with a group of women that one thing that they as survivors could do was to take the life rafts that they had escaped from their home country with and repurpose them and weave them into welcome mats for people that were coming. And you've shared very, very clearly your frustration with the number of times it took. So, but again, it goes back to your point of, keep doing things half-ass, and somebody with another gift will come along and do the other half for you.
And be humble enough to know you've not done it as well. I mean, that's right. That's the key in our ministries. We're not like the experts at. There's people that know music better. There's people that know liturgy better. There's people that know whatever it is, writing better, anything that we do, to be humble enough to go, oh my gosh, I can still learn. I can still be in a place of humility, not because modesty is one of my virtues, but I'm in a place of humility because I need to still learn. I mean, I think personally where we get stuck is when we think, oh my gosh, we have to go out there and change the world. And I have this right theology. I have this right thinking. I have this right way of doing something. And then it's like, okay, so you're done. You're done with your exploration of the spirit. You are done with your exploration of the world and what love is.
Mm-hmm.
But if I instead, it's like, I want to love you so much. I want you and I to be in love and community with a whole bunch of other people. Then I have to be willing to learn and grow and change so I can love better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the calling that Jesus, calls us always to, is to say, be willing to change so you can love the world better.
And that's a great line to segue into your book, because that's one of the bigger themes, the new book. And did I count correctly? This is your 10th?
Yeah, but some of them aren't that good.
For those watching, she just held up the book. For those not watching, I encourage you to look it up. It's called Practically Divine, and it's got one of the most attractive and appealing covers for any book I've ever seen.
Oh my gosh, thank you, because we've had an argument about it.
I love it. I don't know if it's the shading or the design or what, but when I first saw it, it's just like, yeah, this is my right up my alley here.
Oh, thank you. Seriously, that means a lot. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. And I have to tell you, I've highlighted the fire out of it, which made it very difficult to come up with a whittled down list of questions for our conversation. But as I was reading it, there were two images that kept floating through my mind. One was the image of light. And I think that was triggered by your opening chapters about seeing things in the light of day and the flashes of lightning as we go through the tunnels of our journeys. And the other was a feeling of weightlessness as you talk about the different things of shedding your past, shedding regrets, shedding burdens. And collectively for me, it struck me as I was reading this, being reminded of falling down and how many times I've fallen down, and having God reach down and hold out God's hand and say, it's okay, keep going, I'm here with you. So thank you for that. But I have to ask, first of all, what was it about this point in your life, this moment in your journey and the journey with Thistle Farms and the survivors, when you felt the Spirit say, this is when you need to write this book?
Isn't it crazy how all that stuff works? I mean, I know that you have that experience 1,000 times, and everybody listening has that experience too, that it was just the right time. It was the right publisher. HarperCollins has just opened a new imprint called Horizons, and the people were amazing. And they said, yeah, you can write it. And it was like, the world is ready at this point, I think, for all of us to be reading something that's not a self-help book. I mean, we're done with those things in a way, but to have a book that still inspires you, but also is gleaning from 25 years of wisdom from all kinds of people. This is not a book written, by a hero. It's a book written by somebody that wants to be a good host and can take notes from a lot of heroes she's met. And so it's got I felt like it was like I really wanted to write good Southern storytelling, which I hope I included in that, including, weaving my mother's story in it and her sayings and all of those things, but also to say, we can challenge each other and don't have to offer each other the 4 points for solving it. Because these are, the things that I want to talk about most are just part of being human.
Yeah.
And so, like, okay, poverty is a human construct. Okay. But I'm not going to give you 4 things and then we're going to end human poverty. Or human trafficking is the construct of power and violence bolstered by the vulnerability of poverty. I can't give you 4 steps and we're going to solve human trafficking, but we can learn together how it is people don't have to stay within those constructs. People don't have to stay within those systems. And yes, there's talk about prevention and all this other stuff, but what I'm really hoping is when we challenge and inspire each other through good storytelling, through deep theology, it's like we find ourselves in new places and ready to go.
Yeah. What does the title mean to you? You talk about it in the book, but I want to give you a chance to maybe in hindsight see if the way you describe it a little bit, but the phrase practically divine.
Don't you love that phrase?
Oh, it's phenomenal.
Well, I keep thinking about it. Really, how I thought about it was when, like, you make somebody dinner, or I make them, like, I'm a very big crafter. So I make somebody a pair of socks, and people will say, like, they're practically divine. And I know what that means. It means it's almost perfect, but there's some stakes in it.
Yeah.
And it's pretty good. It's practically divine. It's like, fairly good. So I always think of it as not quite and just enough. That's how I think of it. And for me, I've always tried to translate whatever the theology is into a way that people can feel comfortable. So again, like, all of the work of Thistle Farms, this global movement for women's freedom over 25 years, the wording is about love. And I wanted this wording to be about the idea of all of us being almost and just enough, without getting into too deep of theological words that trip people up.
Yeah. Well, you definitely accomplished it. And you talked about good Southern storytelling. One of the things that I love about this, I read the book straight through, but you've done it in such a wonderful way that you can pull it off the shelf or up on your Kindle, depending on what your preference is, and flip to any chapter. And they're each a thread of something that's been woven together, but they also stand alone. So each one could almost be its own separate story. So I love the fact that you did it in such a way that it can be accepted as a whole, and it can be accepted as the individual parts as well. I think it's incredibly powerful that way.
Thank you so much. I can't do this right now on my podcast. Sorry about that. Somebody on my side trying to do so. I'm so sorry.
No, don't worry about it.
No, but don't you think, though, that, like, we can debate each other all day long, but when we get to storytelling, all of us feel moved. Like, if I was to tell you the story of, if I was to debate with you on the issue of immigration and refugees, we might definitely, both of us, bolster ourselves into our own arguments and dig our trenches deeper.
Yeah.
But if we can share, and if you and I went over to the refugee camp in Greece and sat with the women and heard the stories for a few days and wove the rugs that we were making together, you and I would both just be a puddle of tears.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And we would be going like, okay, let's go. We're going to help these 5 women figure out how to get to Sweden to be reconciled with their husbands and bring their children to their fathers. And that would be it. We would be done.
Yeah, I cry at very irrelevant things like television commercials. So to be exposed to something relevant and powerful like that, yes, I guarantee you I would be a puddle on the floor. You mentioned a bit ago your mother, and she to me is the spirit of this book. Not to be disrespectful to you or to any of the survivors, but your mother was the spirit of this book. And I loved the lessons that you learned. And one thing that struck me, because it was a similar experience for me, was talking about that period of time after your father tragically died. Money was very tight. And so you and your siblings and your mom, rather than being able to buy things, would create things. You talk about creating necklaces that you discovered in her dresser drawer after she had died, wrapping lights and creating this beautiful chandelier, all these things that you did, which built community with your siblings and your mother. But it was a way of saving money at a time where, as you write, we were poor. And I grew up in a family of 4 kids, 2 parents. One parent worked, he was a school teacher, made little money. I never thought of us as being poor. We didn't have a lot. It's only recently that I've started to learn how tenuous things really were for us. So when you wrote about that, it struck me deeply, because the circumstances of my life were different, but the root of what you were saying struck me on a very deep level. And with that in mind, I wonder if you talk about why today society has lost that sense of focusing on the simplicity, and not even simplicity that has to grow out of a lack or a want, but just the simplicity for the beauty of it. You write things we make are better because of the stories. Again, there's the word stories again. Things we make are better because of the stories that grow from the creative process, joy that's made along with creation, and wonder that two hands made something beautiful and useful. And I think we've lost that. So what do you think we can do to remotivate people to go back to simplicity?
And I love that you are reflecting back and seeing it was fragile and tenuous, this childhood, but they protected you and they kept you in it. That's a beautiful thought. So thank you for sharing that. And as far as I don't know that we've lost it at all. I think that there is a resurgence in some ways. I mean, how long did it take us in the pandemic when we were asking people, can you sew masks? And we were going back to sewing, and that was a thing.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of examples where it's totally not lost. It may be muted because it's not as flashy as a lot of stuff, but I mean, I've been calling them small revolutions. Like when people discover they can make their own soap detergent, just that, your own laundry detergent. You think about the waste and plastic of laundry detergent. You think about the gross overpricing of laundry detergent because it's whatever, 90% water. You think about this idea that you're just prey to advertisements and media, and all of a sudden you learn, oh my gosh, I can make it for 0.00006 cents a laundry load and add lavender and have the best laundry soap in the world. And it's like all of a sudden you're free of so much stuff. So what I hope is that, church communities, all kinds of communities start to amplify how radical it is to make stuff, how it takes you out of that consumer mindset, how it brings you into a place where, oh my gosh, once a month the church makes laundry soap, and it's hugely radical. I mean, it doesn't seem like it, but it's a theological, it's an environmental, it's a healing, it's all those things we want to be, but in a practical way, if that makes any sense.
It does.
Like instead of just talking about creation theology, instead of just talking about whatever, it's like if we just, everybody that went to church stopped buying laundry detergent, it would be amazing.
Yeah.
And we would still smell and have clean clothes. That's the crazy part. But that's just one tiny example. So I don't think it's lost, but I think we could amplify it better.
Do you find that it's being amplified a bit? And I won't even go globally. I'll just stick with the Nashville community. Do you find that that creative process that the survivors and the employees at Thistle Farms are going through is rippling into even just the immediate community? Are you seeing that take hold just from the example that you all have set?
I think so. And I think it's not just us. We're part definitely of a wave of people that are appreciating that and doing that. Like one thing I will say is every time, we start to make stuff, we try to give people recipes for how they can do it too, because it's not a secret. All these natural processes, all these arts and crafts, the whole point is to gather together with other people to make them over and over and over again, because that is your counseling session.
Yeah.
That is your support group. That is all those things, but you're also doing something where it's like it has an economic value, it has a practical value, it has contemplative value. It adds things to it.
Right.
I mean, I that's why I thought, like, when we started Thistle Farms, I wanted people to have great mental health access, great all the stuff, but also when they come together and share stories, to also maybe pull themselves up out of poverty. And one of the things I will say that I think is really important is that in no way ever did I do this company for women. It was always a small group of us that started, and then women who had been through the 2-year residential program, who had graduated, who had done heroic work, took over all parts of the company. The women survivors, graduates grew this company.
Mhm.
The head of all residential programs is run by a graduate. The head of all national sales run by a graduate. You know, and every team has women who have gone through this that are doing it. So the idea is that if we do this 1,000 times together, like you make detergent 1,000 times, like a sewing bee, whatever it is that we're doing, in the midst of it, you do get to develop leadership,
Mhm.
trust, all those things that we really want as people grow.
Well, and it plays out in different ways. You know, one thing that I was thinking about that I thought was one of the most powerful scenes was near the end of the book, where you talked about a lady that happened to walk by a group of Thistle Farm employees and survivors, and it was obvious that she was hungry, and so they gave her a bag of chips. And I love, and the thing I've been reflecting on about that is the fact that, and you even posed the question or planted the seed for people to think about, there's so much reluctance to try and do anything because, you know, all I've got is a bag of chips, and there are hungry people on every street corner. I can't do it, so I'm just not going to try anything. But as I was reading that, again, being a priest, I think often of scripture, one thing that came to mind was the limited number of fish and loaves with which Christ fed 5,000 people. It was something small that grew into something big. And with that bag of potato chips, this woman's life was changed. I think you said she entered the residential program and has been involved with it. How would you encourage people who don't think they have enough, that they are enough, or that they don't have enough to offer? How would you encourage them or remind them that what they have is more than enough and more than sufficient to do the things that need to be done? You know, you quoted Catherine of Siena, doing doing small things with great love. So how would you remind people of that?
Oh my God, you just did so beautifully. You did it. You just did it. Seriously, that was beautiful. You said it much better than I did, truly.
Well, thank you. I,
I have nothing to add. The way you said it was really much clearer than what I wrote. So I have honestly, I got nothing. I'm just like, yes, to what you said.
oh, well, thank
I know
you.
that's a stupid interview thing. Sorry.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Change is something that you also write powerfully about. It's, you know, you address tackling old sayings, which really pulled me up short, because some of the sayings that you wrote in there are things that I've never given second thought to. And now I'm catching myself and rethinking about, as you say, the sayings that we learned by rote.
Isn't that fun?
Growing. It's fun, but it's how much harm have I inadvertently caused over the years by using these sayings that have such a, in many cases, horrible and twisted beginning and horrible and twisted root? How many people have I hurt by throwing those out there? Conversely, how many people even know what they mean and don't know that they're hurting or being hurt? You talk about, you know, in order to change the world, well, changing the world isn't something we can do. We have to be willing to change ourselves, to love it better. And the right one morning prayer confession came to mind. Done those things which I ought not to have done, and I've left done those things which I ought to have done. It was a very confessional.
That's in Right too, as well.
Yeah, and Right One is the one that came to mind for some reason. Maybe being born in the 1928 prayer book generation has something to do with it. So self-change is difficult. You had the line in there about the fact that you have things that you're ashamed of that you've done in your life. There are things in my life that I've been ashamed of, and that as I've gotten older, especially discernment and now ministry, I feel I'm tackling. But change is hard. How do you what motivation or encouragement can you offer to women that come to Thistle Farms, people that you are chaplain for at Vanderbilt, whatever the circumstances, to remind them that it's something that can be done, and change can be a very graceful process.
I think it's just wishful thinking to think things are going to be different until you change. It's just, and the only reason that people really change is because it becomes less painful to change than to stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I can think of an example of marriage, how easy it is to point out the flaws in your spouse. Oh my God, that's like low hanging fruit, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so I can, we can do that all day long. Like, here's your problem, here's your problem, here's your problem. Like, I see you so clearly that I got all your problems down. And where that leaves you is a really bitter, broken marriage. And that's a painful, hard place to live.
Mm-hmm.
And much harder. It takes much more spiritual agility and all the gifts to say, oh my gosh, here's the thing I could be changing about myself to be a better spouse. And not even having to correct constantly my lesser wise spouse, or whatever it is that you tell yourself. And all of a sudden, I believe that you find it's like, I'm in a happier marriage. I'm in a happier place. I'm working on this stuff. Mm-hmm. And that can be brought into your work, into your spiritual community. I mean, who can't critique a sermon?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Talk about low hanging fruit. It's like, let me tell you the 10 things that you did wrong when you preached today. Instead of saying, here's the one thing that I heard, here's the one sentence I heard that struck me, and I can take it in. Just like, leave the rest.
Yeah.
Taking the stuff that transforms you and brings you into a new space, that's the very hard work. That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I always think of, if I was going to say there was the sin of Episcopalianism, it would be when people default to I'm offended. If Episcopalians somehow say I'm offended, that means you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to be that because you've offended. And it's like, when did that get to be a thing that you get to be offended so you can't be challenged?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I think it's deep spiritual work for us to change. It's deep and it's hard. But I commend everyone to say, what is something about myself that today I would like just to begin to think, how could I change it enough that I would live with less pain? And by pain, I mean, if it's any kind of suffering, the suffering of shame, the suffering of guilt, the suffering of numbness, the suffering of cynicism, the suffering of overwhelmingness, the suffering of anxiety, all of that. What are some small changes that we could do to help those?
Yeah. And, it's, you talk about criticism. It's not even, for me, my experience is it's not even so much being affected by criticism people have of me as much as it's self-criticism. Rather than worrying that somebody found 10 things with the sermon, I'm the one that walks out of church and goes, well, that was a mess. Not knowing though, and having to be reminded sometimes that it's an issue of, it's not what we think of it, it's what the people to whom we're preaching think of it, what resonates with them. And so I think the self-criticism is just as hard.
I'm moving you to a new space. I think self-criticism too. I'm moving you to a new space to show you my secret. So I'm in a humble the place you were was the little sanctuary. Now this is the sacristy.
Yeah.
It's like my closet, but this is where all of it started. And when you say self-criticism and where you go, this is where I go. So this is how I've developed all the healing oils at Thistle Farms. It's got every kind of oil. A lot of the stuff is from Rwanda, one of our global partners there. But I have everything I need to bring myself, like I kind of have to have places I can bring myself back to peace, back into my body, back, like, because I have those voices too. Like if I go to a dinner party, you can guarantee that I'm going to spend part of that night in the bed going, what did I say? Why did I say that? Do you ever do that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh. It's hard.
Well, and it all of it leads into one of the things that you wrote about was, holy imperfection. And it's like you said, it's so easy to see the imperfections in somebody else, the low hanging fruit that you talked about. But we're much more willing to avoid our own. You talked about duct taping over the cracks that we see in our own facade. What are we as priests and caregivers and community builders and that sort of thing not doing enough of to remind people that, as you word it, the imperfect dance that they're dancing is wonderful?
I know. What are we doing to remind them instead of what are we not doing enough of? What are we doing? And it's like, oh my gosh. Early on as a priest, I remember I was in a staff meeting and they had an argument over an asterisk in the bulletin.
Oh gosh.
Because the asterisk meant, did you have to write please stand, or could you just write please stand once with an asterisk and then every other time just have the asterisk?
Mm-hmm.
I swear it was a conversation. You talk about perfection, and like it was a serious debate, and I thought every priest ought to wear an asterisk on a necklace instead of a cross. Not really. That's a joke, everybody, for everybody upset with me. No, I was saying, but like the idea of like, that's what's going to kill us in the end is the asterisks.
Yeah.
I mean, in the end, it will be the asterisks in the bulletin because, or whatever. Do we say we commend vaccines? Do we mandate vaccines? Like it's the asterisk, it's whatever it is. We lose the point of the hope, like what you said at the beginning, is just healthy community.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I would say that anytime we forget the asterisk and see the person, we're doing that, and that's gospel work.
Yeah.
But when we forget to see the people and what's really happening in their lives and we focused on the asterisk, we miss it.
Yeah. Missing the forest because you're too focused on the trees. Yes. Rather than enjoying the forest. And as somebody, and you write a lot about this, that loves to get out into the woods as a way of recentering and clearing your head, seeing the forest despite the trees, I know is something that's really important to you. For me, it's mountains. So it was a very similar type thing.
That's because you have mountains. We just have hills.
Well, anytime you want to come to the Blue Ridge for a visit, we got plenty of mountains I can take you up into.
Yes, I'm there. I'm completely there. I mean, my next goal, I love writing this book, but my next goal is to really write a series of mysteries. And I keep thinking we can talk. There was a category called Justice Mysteries. And I think you could tell a lot of truth and talk a lot of theology in the context of mysteries.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be kind of more in almost the old British sense of it, like, the father the priest who can, look in, solve mysteries and do all this stuff, but there'd be a woman who's kind of crazy who's doing that work. But anyway, I'm desperately in 2022 looking for some places I can go just to write and think of fictional plots. And the mountains would be perfect. So I'd be happy to go up there anytime.
We will talk offline and I'll give you plenty of suggestions over here. I do want to ask, because I know we're drawing near time. You write again throughout, one of the recurring themes is those revelatory aha moments that people experience through change, through a variety of experiences that you talk about. I'm wondering, looking at the period of time between when you started typing the first page and you typed the end of the last page, did you have an aha revelatory moment at the end that you were not expecting at all when you started writing the book?
I had no idea that I was going to end up writing about a vision of a feast. No idea. I would think if you had asked me, I would be writing about the idea of, like you said, weightless, being light, stripping things away. I thought that's where I was going on this theme of practically divine, but it carried me right back to the idea of you don't end up with nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You end up with everything. And it's more than you imagined. And it's makes you weepy with gratitude, with the idea of like, I've let go of enough stuff that I'm filled with something else.
Yeah.
And so it had to end with the idea and the vision of a feast. And I was not expecting that.
And it's not just a feast where we're feeding others. As you said, it's a feast where we feed one another.
Yes.
Which is beautiful. Again, I really hope everybody gets this book because there is some beautiful, beautiful writing and scenes throughout.
You.
And on that note, I would like to invite you, if you would, there's a beautiful paragraph on the top of page 88 that I'm wondering if you would read to close our time together.
Preparation and surprise blend into divine insight. It doesn't hand us truth, but offers us enough to keep on a search that will last our whole lives. I get worried in this world when we proclaim we have the truth, as though since we have discovered the truth, we need no more insights or changes in our lives. I always think back to what my brother says, almost the truth is still a lie. If we can avoid holding on to the truth like it's a wad of bills in our fists, we can hold on to new, refreshing insights. If we can stay humble enough to know we do not possess the ability to hold all history and truth in our heads, we will be regarded as worthy to be gifted with new knowledge.
Amen. Thank you for that. Real quick, for those that would like to learn more about you, follow your ministry and your work, or learn more about Thistle Farms and how they might support it, how can they follow you along in all those ways?
Oh my gosh, I engage most in the Instagram feed. That's my social media preference. I would love DM me on Instagram, Becca Stevens. Follow me. I will take you on a journey weekly, probably, of new places we're headed and what we're doing at Thistle Farms. I would love it. But also Facebook, you can do, follow on the internet. What is it called? Search. You can search for Thistle Farms, thistlefarms.org. That's my COVID brain right there. Thistlefarms.org, and you can order all our products online.
Well, Becca, thank you so much for your time today. I know your time is precious, again, with everything that you're doing. So I'm grateful for a bit of that time. Blessings certainly on you and everybody in your immediate family and community. And I hope you continue to be blessed by Cottonwood Snow.
Thank you. You are kind and you are beautiful, and I am grateful.
Thank you. God bless.
Bye.
Sure.